This episode of the podcast is dedicated to the life and times of Paul Green, who sadly passed away last Thursday, aged just 49 years old. Paul was a rugby league player and also a rugby league coach and just loved the game of rugby league. He started off playing up in Brisbane, winning the Brisbane Rothmans Medal as well, which is the best and fairest player up in Brisbane, before making his way down to the Cronulla Sharks, where he also won the Rothmans Medal as well as the best and fairest player in the competition. Played for 5 clubs in the NRL, New South Wales Rugby League, and also Super League, them being the Cronulla Sharks, the North Queensland Cowboys, the Sydney Roosters, the Parramatta Eels, and also the Brisbane Broncos. Also represented Queensland in State of Origin and also Australia in the Super League competition as well. A fantastic playing career, which then transformed into a coaching career as well, starting off at the Brisbane Broncos as a specialist coach, working with the club halves and hookers, and then also promoted then to an assistant coach at the Brisbane Broncos. Had a lot to do with the 2006 winning Broncos team. Also coached the Winner Manly Seagulls to back-to-back premierships in the Queensland Cup. And then also was an assistant coach at the Roosters when they won their 2013 premiership under Trent Robinson. But then also in 2014 became the North Queensland Cowboys coach, and then in 2015 became the first coach of the North Queensland Cowboys to win a premiership for that club, with North Queensland winning their first ever premiership against the Brisbane Broncos. So a magnificent legacy there left in the whole region of North Queensland, winning that premiership. A lot of people say it was the immortal Jonathan Thurston and a few other players that led that team to victory, but without Paul Green being at the helm, who knows what might have happened. But another accolade that also goes on Paul Green's resume is also that he coached the Cowboys to their first World Club Championship, defeating the Leeds Rhinos as well. So, but another interesting fact about his coaching career is in 2017 in the NRL with the Cowboys, the Matt Scott and Jonathan Thurston were ruled out earlier in the season with injury, and to finish the 2017 season in 8th place, made it all the way to the grand final, unfortunately going down to a Melbourne Storm team, but a magnificent effort when you consider taking out those 2 leaders of the North Queensland Cowboys out of their team and to get them to the grand final. A magnificent achievement as well. Paul also coached Queensland as well, so one of those very rare opportunities you see where a player plays for Queensland and then coaches Queensland, or any player in State of Origin, coach in State of Origin. But in 2021, Paul got the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, Queensland went down in the series 2-1, and Billy Slater took over as coach in 2022. But a very sad story, doing the rounds of the rugby league. my thoughts go out to Paul's family and friends. Condolences to them. And it's, as I said, just a very sad story. If anybody needs help out there, or who needs a chat just to get something off their chest, or just to see how they're going, anytime, just reach out, send a message to somebody, ring somebody, or there are people out there that can help you. Lifeline 13 11 14, they can be a massive help as well. There's also Gotcha for Life as well. Gus Warland doing a magnificent job there in this space about mental health, mental fitness. So there are experts out there that can help. We're going to hear in a moment from Damien Kelly, who was the Parramatta Eels media manager in 2003 when Paul played at the Parramatta Eels. It was only a short career there at the Eels, just the one season, only 7 games at starting halfback before a fractured cheekbone ended his season. But we're going to hear some stories from Damien about Paul, about his time at the Parramatta Eels. So I appreciate Damien for coming onto the podcast during this difficult time for everyone that knew Paul, both as a player, as a coach, as a friend. So once again, thoughts go out to his family and friends, condolences, and for everyone else out there, if you are in a time of struggle, reach out, contact someone, talk to a mate, give them a phone call, give them a message, catch up, just ask the question, are you okay? And hopefully we can sort of prevent some of this stuff from happening. So we'll hear from Damien, and then we'll have a moment's silence, and then we will move into this week's episode of the podcast. So rest in peace, Paul. Thank you for what you did in rugby league. You're going to be sorely missed by everybody. And yeah, we will now hear from Damien, and then a moment's silence. Rest in peace, Paul. And this week in rugby league has been a bit of a sad week, so I thought this week I would tribute the podcast edition this week, episode 107, to Paul Green, who unfortunately passed away on Thursday of last week. Now, on the line I have Damien Kelly, former guest on the podcast, and he was also the Parramatta Eels media manager back in 2003 when Paul played at the Eels. Welcome to the Paracave podcast, Damien. I wish we were talking about greater circumstances. But first of all, welcome. And we heard the tragic news last week about Paul Green passing away. You were the media manager at Parramatta at the time. What are your memories of Paul?
Oh, look, great to join you again, Troy. And as you said, wish we were chatting under much better circumstances. Like everyone else, stunned and very sad when I heard the news about Greenie. You're right in your introduction. I was the Eels media manager when he came to the club in 2003, and then I saw him, after he left the club. He obviously went and played at the Broncos the year after, and then bumped him at many other footy grounds. He did a bit of commentary there for a while, and appeared on a few TV stations, and then bumped into him at footy grounds all over the place. Was always first to say g'day, and it's just really tragic news. Greenie was a great little fella, like all halfbacks. They've got a little bit of cheekiness in them, I think.
Yeah.
A smart aleck, but a funny one. Look, we never saw the best of him when he was at Para. He was at the end of his career. I think he only played 6 or 7 games for us in 2003. played for the Broncos in '04 and then retired after that season because he was suffering some pretty serious injuries towards the end. But one thing that I absolutely remember about Greeny was the belief he had in the people around him and the way he wanted to nurture young talent through.
Okay. Yeah.
He was a very strong trainer and didn't muck around at training. He mucked around when training wasn't on, but certainly when training was on, it was like he was at work, and
Yep.
he was a very, very good trainer. He prepared his body the best he could. It's no surprise that he went on to become such a successful coach because he was a great student of the game. He understood the game. He watched it. He was a real footy head. But look, he came to Para, as I said, at the end of his career. We had a pre-season camp up on the Gold Coast, and I know how much work he put into that. But also, I think he realised that the Eels had a lot of young players coming through that probably weren't ready and weren't going to make a big splash in first grade straight away. But he could see potential. I know one he particularly took a shine to was a young centre from Cherbourg in Queensland called Willie Tonga.
Oh, yeah.
Who had only, I don't even think had played first grade by that end, but kept saying he was going to be a superstar. He ended up playing for Queensland in Origin, ended up playing for Australia, Willie Tonga.
Yeah.
And Greeny really, because I think they were from relatively similar places in Queensland, and he could identify him straight along. So he was a bit of a mentor to him, as he was to a lot of the younger players. But Greeny was one of those guys that would always, back in those days, we used to play three grades on the one day.
Yep.
And he'd be one of those guys that would be there ready for, the under-20s or the first game and watch all that, because not only was he a great club man, but he was also just a student of the game and loved his footy.
Is there one funny standout moment that sticks out for you?
Look, there was a few things he did. As I said, he was more that he was the smart aleck when and him and Brian Smith was our coach in those days, and they got along very, very well because obviously Greeny was at the end of his career and was sort of the elder statesman in the team. But look, he was big on his practical jokes and loved to laugh, loved being around his teammates, and really loved that aspect of the game. And he came into our club, and it was like, and look, it was the same as everyone walked into the doors at Parramatta. You walk in the doors as a Parramatta player, and you're part of the club. That's it. It doesn't matter if you've played 100 games or no games. If you walk in that door as a player, you're embraced by everyone. And I know all the old timers at the time, who worked the barbecue or worked the sheds, or would always comment about what a good bloke he was. And as I said, he suffered some very serious injuries when he was with us.
Yeah.
He had a very bad facial fracture.
Yep.
Really severe, and probably would have, ended the career of a lot of players. But Greeny was determined to get back on the field, and he did that. And he'd won a Rothmans medal. He'd won, played in Super League Origins, and played for Australia and played for Queensland. So he'd really done it all. But he was so determined to get back on the field, and I think his tenacity is something that, for such a little bloke, he had more courage than someone double his size.
Yeah, for sure. Eel number 646. Is going to be deeply, sorely missed by the whole rugby league community. And if any of the listeners out there know of anybody that's struggling, or even just asking someone, your mates, your friends, just say, how's everything going? Is everything okay? But then if need be, there's always Lifeline Australia on 13, 11, 14 that people can contact and talk to. And hopefully we can prevent some of this sort of stuff, tragedies happening.
It's certainly shone a light on how people are in it together, and what resources and help is available. I think in the days since Paul's very sad death, I think the way the rugby league community is talking, and general society, is talking, there is, at least there's momentum behind the capacity and the options out there for people to talk. And as you said, whether it's Lifeline or it's, the Gotcha for Life program or anyone, it's just having a chat with someone and just whatever's in your head, get it out in the open, because most problems disappear when you tell someone else about them.
Yeah, that's it. Well, Damien, thank you very much for joining me today and giving us a little bit of an insight into Paul Green when he was at the Eels. Really appreciate it. And during these hard times, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Troy. It was great to be able to pay tribute to Greenie in this way.
That's it. Rest in peace, Paul.
Thank you.
Listeners, my name is Shannon Cooney from Merrick Property Group Real Estate Agency and a very proud sponsor of the Para Cave podcast. If you own a property in the Penrith LGA or Lower Blue Mountains and would like to know what it's worth in today's market, give me a call on 0421 588 445.
Broadcasting live from the Para Cave. Hello and welcome to another bumper episode of the Para Cave podcast. My name is Troy Warner and I'll be your host this week and every week. And today it is episode 107. And today, well, I'm chatting with someone who I grew up listening to and watching on a Saturday afternoon on a little sports show called Wide World of Sports. And when you hear his voice, you will no doubt recognise it as well, and that is Mr. Ian Maurice. Now, during the chat with the Bear, that is his nickname in case you didn't know, you might know him as Ian the Bear Maurice, but we talk about how he got that nickname, how he got into the media, both radio and TV, his love for music, and we also talk about some iconic people in the media that he worked with, including Darrell Eastlake, who, along with Ian, really transformed State of Origin TV commentary and coverage. We also talk about a major Parramatta Eels fan, Ken Sutcliffe, and we also talk about the former owner of Channel 9, Kerry Packer, as well. We also talk about some of his iconic commentary moments, some personality set of 6 questions, and much, much more. So much to get through and to listen to. All brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club in the club shop. And later on the podcast, I'll give you some information on how you could win a car, a new Subaru Impreza, with a competition that Parramatta Leagues Club is running, so stay tuned for that one. And also a shout out to co-sponsors Shannon Cooney from the Merrick Property Group, the Stubby Club. And speaking of the Stubby Club, Father's Day is getting ever so closer. So for the best present for Dad, the Stubby Club has a huge range of sports merch and gifts to choose from. Simply head to thestubbyclub.com.au and remember to use the Paracave at checkout for a 10% discount. And also, thank you to Bo Cook from Loan Market, your local Penrith mortgage expert, as well as a co-sponsor of the podcast. who's just come on board. If you're looking for a loan specialist near you who knows it all, has a great team working with him. How do I know? Well, Bo helped myself and my wife Amanda with a home loan. So we have that personal experience of what Bo and his team can do for you during these difficult financial times and get the best deal for you. Simply contact Bo today on 0401 213 236 and get in contact with him for a free chat and see what he can do for you, and let him know that you heard it here on the Paracave podcast. Thank you to all the sponsors. With your support, it helps the podcast grow and reach more people, which is much appreciated. But enough of me talking. You don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from the guest this week. So let's get in the chat with the Bear, Ian Maurice. Have a listen to his rugby league story. So, as Hindy says,
get a beer, coffee, whatever you want.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and let's get straight into it.
Hi, it's Ian Maurice. You might know me as the Bear. After a long, long career in radio and television, calling football games and calling everything that moves, I'm very excited to be on the Paracave with Troy, and let's see what we can talk about.
And as you heard from his intro, joining me on the Paracave podcast today isn't a player or coach of the Eels or a player of rugby league or an Eels fan, but it's someone I grew up watching and listening to, watching rugby league, and in particular the State of Origin series that were on in the 80s, and also the Saturday afternoon iconic Wide World of Sports show, which I and many others watched in the 90s. Welcome to the Paracave podcast, Mr. Ian the Bear Maurice.
Thank you, Troy. Nice to be with you.
No worries. Thanks for joining me. Now, growing up, whereabouts was it, and what sports did you like to play or were interested in participating in?
Well, I grew up at Lidcombe in Sydney. I spent pretty much my first, 16, 17 years of my life living at Lidcombe with my parents, and I played cricket and I played baseball and I played rugby league for the Lidcombe United team at Lidcombe Oval in the Western Suburbs Junior Rugby League. And I could have been anything, but I wasn't.
What position did you play rugby league at?
Front row, second row.
Yeah. How did you go?
Well, we went all right. I had a few people who were choosing representative teams come and talk to me, but I didn't pursue it because I just had a lot of other interests outside of football. I've always been involved in music, and I wanted to try and get into radio as well. So it wasn't. I knew I was never going to be a world beater. So I really just did it for a bit of fun, and then left it to pursue a career.
So playing at Lidcombe Oval then, was Western Suburbs the team that you supported growing up, or still do?
Well, I guess in those years it was, although a fellow who lived next door to me moved in from Lithgow, and he was a fellow called Greg McMillan. Now, I was looking over the back fence one day, and I saw a South Sydney jersey on the line. Yeah. And so I asked him what it was all about, and it turns out he was playing for South Sydney. Okay. He was a winger. He played for the country first. A goal-kicking winger, Greg McMillan, played with Souths. I'm trying to think what years it would have been. Probably 63, 62, 63, around there sometime. So obviously, when that occurred, my allegiance went to South Sydney. I started following them, and Greg would invite me along to training sessions and all those sorts of things, and so I met up with all of the stars of the day, and formed something of a friendship with John Sattler, who was a young second rower in those days, and when I got into radio later on. He was a constant source of my interviews. I would always go to Sats and ask for a quote and all that sort of stuff. So it was Western Suburbs initially, and then South Sydney.
Yeah, definitely champion player, champion bloke, Johnny Sattler. I had his son,
Absolutely.
Scotty Sattler, on the podcast a few weeks ago, and
Yep.
he's a champion as well.
Well, he was a baby. Well, I can remember Scott as a baby when they
Okay.
moved into a new house. So I've known Scott for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So along with John Sattler, was there any other favourite players that you used to love watching?
Oh, look, I don't know about favourite players. I was just in awe of most of them, you know. Dennis Pittard, I thought, was a fantastic player. And look, Bob McCarthy, John O'Neill, you could go on and on with those great South Sydney sides, you know. But I wouldn't say anyone was a particular favourite. I was just, as I say, in awe of most of them.
So you mentioned there that music was always been a passion of yours, and
Yeah.
you wanted to get into radio as well. And then,
Yep.
so how and when did the media become a part of your life?
Well, I was playing music. I used to play guitar all those years ago, and I was playing on board a cruise ship that called into Cairns up in far north Queensland.
Yep.
And we had a day or so in Cairns, and I was wandering around the streets and stumbled across the local station, 4CA. And because I'd been doing a radio announcer's course, I was interested in radio. So I rang the buzzer, and it was a weekend, and lo and behold, the announcer came down and showed me around the place and told me that there was a job coming up in a month or so, and I should send an audition tape. Well, I thought, well, why should I send an audition tape? Why don't I just do one here?
Okay.
So he set me up in a studio, and I did an audition tape. And about a month, maybe 2 months, I got a telegram. That'll tell you how long ago it was, a telegram offering me the job. So off I went from Sydney. I drove in my little Ford Cortina all the way up to Cairns, and that was the start of the radio career.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Was it always radio that you wanted to work in, or did you want to transition into TV at some stage?
I guess initially it was radio. I didn't see myself as a television performer, but that came about. I worked my way through 4CA in Cairns. I went to Inverell, and in fact, I'll digress for a moment. Inverell was the place where I called my first game of football,
Okay.
because the regular rugby league caller for 2NZ was ill one weekend, and they asked me if I could call football. And I said, I'll give anything a go. So Inverell was playing Guyra, which is a bitterly cold place. And I hopped in the car and went out to Guyra for Inverell versus Guyra.
Yeah.
I did what I thought was the right thing to do. I went into the dressing rooms and looked at the players and made handwritten notes about, you know, his tall red hair and all that sort of stuff, you know.
Yep.
And I sat down on the sideline, and it started to snow. And of course, all of my handwritten notes were all blurry, and I couldn't read anything. And the people who came to watch the game all sat in their cars around the oval, around the perimeter of the oval.
Yeah.
And every time I called a wrong player, all the car horns would go. So that was my first introduction to calling football. From 2NZ, I went to 2KA in Katoomba,
Oh, yeah.
and then to 2SM. And at 2SM, I worked alongside Frank Hyde, who younger viewers may not know a lot about, but Frank Hyde was the doyen of football callers in Sydney. His ratings at 2SM were astronomical, and everyone would listen to Frank Hyde. So it was a great honour, and I learned a heck of a lot working with Frank. I sat alongside him, and I would go out at the match of the day and present the Seiko watch to the player of the game.
Yeah.
And everybody used to stay until the end of the game, until they could see me walk out and shake hands with the player, and they knew he was the player of the match. And it was quite strange, because Frank was very flippant about who he chose, and we'd be in the bar after the game, and somebody would come up and say, "Hey, Frank, who'd you give your award to?" And he'd say, I don't know, Bob McCarthy. And they said, "Why would you give it to him?" And Frank said, "Because he was a Catholic." So those were fun days. But I'll tell you what, when I think back on those days, it was really fantastic to watch these people work, and the camaraderie that they had amongst themselves, all the rival stations. Now, there was Frank on 2SM, there was Tiger Black on 2KY, there was Cole Pearce on 2UE, and probably John O'Reilly on the ABC, I think. But anyway, they'd all gather around for a drink afterwards and have a chat. But the thing was, if any of those rivals had a problem getting their lines correct, back to the studio, Frank would go out of his way to help. Can we test this? Can we do this? Just to help them get on air.
Okay, wow.
And when I think back on that, and I think about the stark differences between then and now, I mean, these days, the rivals would go and cut the other lines for somebody else to get on air. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that was fantastic to work in those days with Frank. Now I've digressed, and I don't know where we were talking about. Now, where did we get there?
I think it was that. Did you want to end up working on TV?
Oh, TV,
after radio.
Yeah, so I'm working with Frank on 2SM, and I got a phone call from Channel 7 from the news director of the day, a fellow called Bob Johnson, and he said, "Look, as you know, Rex Mossop is our sports director and does the sport on the weekend, but he refuses to work during the week. Would you be interested in coming into audition to be our sports presenter in the Monday to Friday news bulletin?" I thought, oh, give me anything to go.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did the audition, and they said, "Yeah, okay, we like what you did. We'll put you on trial for 3 months." Well, I never heard any more about it. I just stayed there, So that was my introduction to television. And I was at Channel 7 for, I don't know, 3 years or whatever it was. And all through my life, I've tended to get a little bored doing the same thing.
Okay.
And that was no different back then. And an opportunity came up to become the what was called back in those days the secretary of the Penrith Rugby League Club, the football.
Yeah.
So I left Channel 7 and went to become, I guess it's the equivalent today is general manager of the football club. But as I say, it was called secretary back then. So I was secretary of the Penrith Football Club for 3 years, I think. But it was a vastly different world back then. I mean, it was they weren't full-time professionals.
Yeah.
They weren't full-time professionals on the football committee. It was a totally different game. And I had what I thought was some professional ideas, but it didn't work out. And after 3 years or so, I left and returned to television. And I went to Channel 9 and I went to TUE as sports director, and I was doing some casual stuff at Channel 9. And then after a year or so, Channel 9 said, "Look, we want you to come full-time. You can still work TUE part-time if you want, but, we've got this new show starting called Wide World of Sports, and we'd like to be part of it." So I went to Channel 9 then, and I guess the rest is history, really.
Well, one of those first jobs on TV at Channel 9 was the 1982 Commonwealth Games held in Brisbane. And
yes.
That's where you met your great mate, who has unfortunately passed away now, Darrell Eastlake. What are your first memories of Big Darrell?
Well, my first memory is this big fella with a big loud voice saying, "G'day, bear!" And I was calling the swimming at the Commonwealth Games. And then after the swimming had finished after the first week, they had to find something for me to do and something for Darrell to do because he was doing something else.
Yep.
And they said, "We want you and Darrell to go and call the lawn bowls."
Oh, wow.
Well, that was an experience, wasn't it? Neither of us knew anything about lawn bowls. So we brushed up as best we could. But again, as Darrell did right throughout his career, heads were turning when he'd come on and say things like, "Oh, let's touch the deck." The normally reserved lawn bowls crews were in horror as Darrell went about his business. But yeah, that was the start of a great friendship. The following year, 1983, Channel 9 secured the rights to State of Origin, and also back in those days we did Saturday afternoon football.
Okay. Yeah.
that was played. They'd wipe all the sports, and then they'd cross live to the football. So Darrell and I would call the Saturday afternoon game, as well as the State of Origin when it came up, and Test matches. So that was the first year, 83. For some reason or other, they didn't pursue the Saturday games, but they did hang on to State of Origin and Test matches in 84 and on. So in 84, I became the update king, so to speak, on the wide world of sports. And then when State of Origin and Test matches were on, Darrell and I would unite again and start calling those. But it was a totally different era to what they do now.
You mentioned then that Darrell said, "Hey Bear, how you going?" How did that nickname come about? Who gave it to you?
You know, I'd love $1 for every time that question came up to me. And I really should make up a fantastic story about it, but because it's really boring. When I started at Channel 7 in whatever year that was, I've forgotten now, 73 maybe? Yeah, I think 73. The girls in the office said that I was cuddly, like a bear. And it just stuck. Okay. It just stuck. Yeah. That's all there is to it. As I say, I wish I could make up a more exciting story.
Fair enough. Oh, I thought it might have been because you supported the North Sydney Bears, but...
No, most people assumed that. But no, I've never been a North Sydney supporter. Yeah. Nothing against them, of course. But no, it was nothing to do with the Bears.
Fair enough. Now, to that that's good. Now, to that State of Origin coverage with yourself and Darrell, the Queensland fans are known to be, or how do I put it, quite passionate towards New South Welshmen. Yourself and Darrell had some quite a few the experiences on a few occasions walking on the field, didn't you? Up in Queensland.
Yeah, at the old Lang Park. The locals knew that we were from New South Wales, of course. But back in those days, unlike today, Darrell and I would work in roughly 10-minute shifts, you know. After 10 minutes, when there was a stoppage of some kind, he would come on and take over from me and vice versa. Yep. And it was pretty difficult, I have to tell you, because you'd get into a rhythm and then you'd have to stop. And then Darrell would start, and then after his 10 minutes, he'd have to start all over again and get back into a rhythm. And not only that, but from 84 on, the only games, we weren't calling club games. So it took a little while to get into a rhythm that you could bring excitement to the game. Yeah, for sure. Unlike today, I mean, they're calling football all the time, as you well know. So doing a State of Origin game is not as difficult now as it was for us back then, because we used to have to they'd hired a big video screen in our hotel room and show us a video of last year's game so that we could try and call and, you know, get into some kind of system.
Okay.
But when we first went to Lang Park, there was Darrell and myself, and the expert commentator was Arthur Summons, another one who sadly left us. Yeah. And Arthur, as you know, played at the highest level in both rugby league and rugby union, and he was only a really tiny man. But it wouldn't matter what size the opponents were, he would be right in their face. You know, he was a really tough man, and it was when you think about that, and then you saw him in the middle of Lang Park with Queenslanders hurling abuse and other things at us, his hand would be shaking with the microphone and he just couldn't handle it. But the worst part of all of that was because of our 10-minute segments, whoever had finished 10 minutes before full time had to get up from the commentary box, because the commentary box was on the opposite side of the dressing rooms in those days. You get out of the commentary box and walk around the hill to the dressing rooms to do the post-match interviews.
Yeah.
Well, they knew we were from New South Wales, and they would be hurling everything. They would throw beer cans at us. And I have to tell you, without wanting to be too indiscreet here, at one stage, they urinated on us as we were walking around. And so you'd have your jacket smelling of wee, trying to interview these players in the dressing room. Oh, it was horrendous. They asked the police if they would give us an escort, and they did the first day. But after that, they wouldn't do it. They refused to do it. It was unbelievable. The scenes were unbelievable back then.
Oh yeah, a lot has changed, hasn't it, these days?
Oh yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't happen these days, but
Well, it wouldn't happen these days because they've got 25 commentators. You know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
But back then, it was just us.
That's it. What was your favourite Origin moment that you commentated?
Jeez.
Is there one?
I can't think of one right now. I mean, there were as you know, so many of those games had such excitement in them. There was one game I can recall, and don't ask me what year it was, at the Sydney Cricket Ground, terrible weather, muddy field, and somebody tried a field goal, I think, or put up
Wally Lewis put the kick up.
Wally Lewis, and it bounced off the crossbar.
That's right, and Greg Dowling caught it and under the post.
You got a good memory.
80...
Yeah, is it 4 or 5 or something like that?
Yeah, I was going to say 87, I thought, but
well, you may well be right.
I don't know. I'm only guessing, but yeah, I remember that game. Yeah,
and that was a difficult game to call because of the conditions, but excitement, such excitement in those days, and it's still today, of course. Not suggesting otherwise, but it was new. We hadn't been used to such drama. Because club games, exciting though they might have been, never produced that sort of drama. And the crowds were enormous. And I get tingles up my spine when I think about it, really.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think that might have been the same game with Crusher Cleal and his dropout, his famous dropout, when the ball just sank into the ground. Yes. Poor Crusher.
I think you're right, yeah. Yeah, they were funny days, all right.
That's it. Now, one piece of commentary that you're very famous for is when you moved over to Channel 10 and started calling club games.
Yeah.
And it's when a former guest on the podcast, Steve Jackson, scored that try in the 89 grand final.
Yeah.
Which gets replayed every year, grand final time.
Yeah.
Was that just one of those chance moments that you were talking and then that happened? Is that your favourite ever piece of commentary?
That's exactly what happened. And I remember, I can't remember the exact words I used, but I said, what a performance, what a try, what a grand final, or something like that. And Rex Mossop, sitting next to me, said, what a commentary. Yeah. Now, look, that was just, you get caught up in those moments, I mean, Ray Warren's been caught up in all kinds of things like that over the years. He did a lot more Origin matches than I did. But yeah, that was quite a moment. Probably was my favourite moment. There was another. There've been plenty of them, but you sort of lose track of them after a while. But because it gets replayed so often, that's probably my favourite moment.
Yeah, well, Steve Jackson doesn't mind it getting replayed every year, so he loves grand final time.
Yeah, well, particularly if Canberra's playing.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we end up back at Channel 9 and on the sports desk giving the sports updates.
Yeah,
each half an hour, I think it was.
Just before we go back there, Let me just tell you something about the Channel 10 days, because Channel 10 in 1988 had the Olympics, the Seoul Olympics, and they were trying to build up a sporting team, not just for that, but for their rugby league, because they were doing club games, as you know. And I left Channel 9. I wanted to stay at Channel 9, to be honest with you, but they fuss about so much with contracts that I was getting pressured from Channel 10, so I signed with Channel 10. And then they suddenly realised at Channel 9, as State of Origin was approaching in 88, that they didn't have another commentator. So Sam Chisholm, who was the former boss at Channel 9, the 9 Network, called me when I was at Channel 10, and he said, "Hey, any chance you can get out of your contract?" I said, "No, mate, it's all sealed." Okay, well, I said, "You sure? Do you want me to have a few words with them?" I said, "No, Sam, don't worry about it." Anyway, it was then that they signed Ray Warren.
Okay.
Because Ray was not, I don't think he was doing anything at that time. And the rest is history, of course. So Rabbits really should thank me, shouldn't he?
Yeah, thanks, Bear.
Yes. So I went over to Channel 10, and there was Graham Hughes and myself. They were trying to emulate Darrell and myself, and Rex Mossop in the middle. Well, Graham Hughes had a huge dislike of Rex. And I wasn't a big fan of Rex either, because he'd done some pretty ordinary things when I was at Channel 7 years before that. But Rex had mellowed an awful lot now by the time I worked with him again. And he and I became quite pally. But Graham was antagonising Rex all the time. If Rex happened to call a wrong player, instead of when that happens and you're working as a team, you just nudge the guy who's made the blue and just point to a name on the program or whatever, Yeah. No, not back then. Graham would have to come. No, Rex, that's wrong. It was so,
Yeah.
It's just. Anyway, I digress. So I was sort of in between. I had to get between them to stop them having a go at each other.
That's right. I remember, Billy Anderson on the sidelines, and
yeah, that's right.
I remember the old Johnny Croucher footy tab updates as well.
Yeah, and I did a Sunday night show they called Late Night League as well, which we used to do out of the broadcast van. Because we were still at the ground, and they'd record it from there, and that ran for a couple of seasons, I think. So so 88 Seoul Olympics with Channel 10, and then after 3 years, because they went belly up, Channel 10, they went bankrupt, and everybody's contracts weren't being renewed because they had no dough. So back to Channel 9 I went, and the Wide World of Sports updates, yes.
Yeah, no, that Saturday afternoon show, I loved it. It was one of the most watched programs on a Saturday arvo, and must have been a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. In fact, when I think back to those days, we had such fun doing the shows. None of us really mixed socially or anything like that. We Max Walker, who was their co-host at one stage, he lived in Melbourne, so he'd come up to Sydney for the shows. So then he'd go back to Melbourne. But we didn't mix socially, but we sort of had a good on-camera click, if you know what I mean. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then the 12th man brings out those records imitating your voices on the show.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about those? Especially taking you off.
They were very clever, clever. Imitation is the best form of compliments or something, isn't it? I know there were a few of the people at Channel 9, the on-camera people at 9, who didn't take to it all that well.
Yeah.
Richie Benno, took a long time before he came around. Chappelle didn't like it at first, but he warmed to it after a while. They were very clever. It's a pity, when you think about it. It's a pity that they don't have a show that they could do something similar with these days, because there isn't one.
No, there isn't. As I said, it used to be Saturday afternoon. I think it used to go for about 6 hours, didn't it?
Yeah, we used to come on from
midday or something.
Might have been, it was either 12 or 1 through till 5 or 6. It was a long time.
Yeah.
5 hours.
Yeah, that's it. Now, another person that you worked with at Channel 9 was the great Ken Sutcliffe, or as the 12th man used to like to call him, the male model from Mudgee, who I believe, like myself, is an Eels fan. What was it like to work with Ken on and off the camera?
Didn't have a lot to do with Ken, to be honest with you. Obviously, we didn't. As I say, we never mixed socially. So the only time that I would run into Ken was when we were doing the show. But Ken came to Channel 9. I was already at 9 when Ken came, and he came to us from Townsville, I think, from memory. He'd been doing something up there and came down as a reporter in the newsroom. And he did a very good job, and he's very capable. Professional, and it wasn't long before they realised that he had this potential, and I guess his big break came. Let me think. I think his big break would have came when Mike Gibson moved to Channel 10, and then Ken slotted into that chair.
Okay.
Although, having said that, I can remember he did he did the straight man for Graham Kennedy.
That's right.
In I forgot, what like Coast to Coast or something like that they called it, and so that was probably his first break. And then he got thrown into the co-host chair of Wide World of Sports, and now he's retired too. I think I haven't heard from Ken for years, but we did the Commonwealth Games together up here in Brisbane, and we did a lot of things, but never mixed socially.
Is there is there a funny Ken story, a go-to story about one time on the show at all?
I can't think of one.
No.
Ken wasn't really a practical joker.
Okay.
And there were a few practical jokers in my career, but Ken wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
When it came to being on camera, he was all business, and very capable. But no, I haven't got one for him. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair enough. Fair enough. And another person at Channel 9 that no doubt you would have come in contact with, being the owner of Channel 9, was Kerry Packer.
Mm-hmm.
Was he the same sort of person we think he was, or was there a different?
I don't know. What do you
side?
think he was?
Well, the big multi-millionaire owner, anything he wanted, he got, that sort of thing. Or was there a different side to him that you saw?
No, that's pretty right, the way you describe him. Even though he got what he wanted, just about all of the decisions that he made and all the things that he wanted proved to be very successful. He was the one who started 60 Minutes, not hands-on, but the idea of doing the 60-minute show. He was he wanted to do Wide World of Sports. He wanted to do the cricket, and we know the story of how the cricket came about with World Series cricket versus establishment cricket, and that was the right thing to do. So he was a very good judge, even though he owned the place and could do what he wanted. Everything he wanted to do turned out to be the right choice. When we started to do Saturday football in '84, he got his head together with David Hill, who was the executive producer of Wide World of Sports, not just the show, but the whole sports department.
Yep.
Now, David Hill was a genius and still is. More about him before I talk about Kerry.
Yep.
David Hill is the man who along with Brian Morelli, the director, established the look of cricket today, the way it is today. Prior to Channel 9 doing cricket, it was the ABC, and they had one camera from one end, basically. So all you would see is the bowler running away from you or running towards you.
Yep.
But with Brian Morelli and David Hill, they took cricket to another level. And he was the one who made State of Origin football an event. When Channel 7 did State of Origin in 1980, 81 and 82, with due respect to them, they treated it just like another football game. When Channel 9 had it, with David Hill at the helm, that's hard to say, David Hill at the helm, it became not just another football game, it became an event. And it's still an event today. And I think David Hill and probably to a lesser extent Brian Morelli should be credited with the success of State of Origin football. Absolute genius. He was the one who told us what Kerry wanted.
Yep.
And I had one meeting with Kerry about that. Kerry, Mr. Packer, the late Mr. Packer, called Darrell Eastlake and myself into David Hill's office. He sat down with us, and he had his feet up on the desk, and he said, "Right, now this is the way I want it. Instead of just telling me who the player is after he's got the ball, I want you to tell me who it is before he gets the ball." Okay, that's a pretty tall order, but we'll have a go. So that was what he wanted. We never achieved that, obviously, but he was a man who kept his word. If he said, "I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you, I'm going to do this for the program," he did it. So I admire him for that. And he did a lot of things, charity things that nobody ever knew about. So even though he was multi-billionaire, and had this network of television stations and magazines, etc. He was a man of his word, so you got to admire that.
What did he ever come back to you and say, "Oh, you're not calling the play right at all"?
No,
Did he ever notice?
didn't. But I'll tell you something funny. I was doing the sport in the news, in the 6 o'clock news, with Brian Henderson,
Yep.
and at the stage where, remember, there were two cricket bodies. There was World Series cricket, Kerry Packer's World Series cricket, and there was the Australian Cricket Board's cricket, which was basically the establishment cricket.
Yep.
And I was reading the sport one night, and I said something along the lines of the fourth test, that's the establishment test, was heading for an exciting finish tomorrow. Australia needs whatever number of runs. And, when the news had finished, I went back to the makeup department to take the stuff off my face, and the phone rang. Makeup girl answered it, and she said, "It's Mr. Packer for you." Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Packer. He said, "Are you a buffhead or what?" "Oh, I don't know, am I?" He said, "Yes, you are. Just remember this, son. Whatever I've got is the World Series cricket. The establishment cricket will never be heading for an exciting anything." You get the message?
Nice.
Again, he knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of Channel 9's success, particularly in Sydney, came about because you never knew if Kerry was watching. And if he was watching and he didn't like something that you'd done, you'd hear about it. Whereas they didn't have that luxury in Melbourne, and they were allowed to run pretty much their own show down there, because unless Kerry happened to be in Melbourne at the time, and you never knew if he was watching or not. You were always giving it your best shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, obviously, with him in Sydney and them down in Melbourne, they could run their own show.
Yeah.
And not having to be worried unless there was a lot of phone calls.
Exactly.
I see your love of music is still as strong today as it was before, the TV and radio work. You've released 4 albums and starred in many musicals.
I've still got most of them in my shed. Can I interest you in one? I've got 20,000 of them here. No, I've always loved music. I grew up with music, and it's always been a passion of mine. I think it's a love, it's a passion, it's an opportunity to express yourself and all that sort of stuff, and I'm although I'm not doing a lot these days, I do spend a bit of time in retirement villages entertaining folks who otherwise can't get out to hear and listen to music, hear and watch shows, So it brings me great pleasure to see somebody, even those who are sadly have dementia. It gives me great pleasure when you see somebody who probably couldn't tell you who they are or whatever, tapping their feet and knowing the words to some songs,
Yeah, definitely.
It really makes you feel good.
Oh, yeah, no doubt it would, yeah. Now, I usually hit this part of the interview with some, like, what I call common league questions, but I guess they're sort of like common commentary questions, I guess.
Righto.
Taking out those games that we spoke about, is there a favourite game that you worked on, one that really stood out for whatever reason? That
there is for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't with Darrell. I was by myself.
Okay.
Calling a test match, Australia v New Zealand, from Carlaw Park in Auckland.
Oh yes.
And all that I had they didn't have a commentary box, which was not uncommon back then. But they had a scaffolding suspended from the roof of the grandstand.
Oh, nice.
And you had to climb up this long ladder to get to the scaffolding, and that's where you perched yourself, and that's where you called the game. Well, like a good boy, I went to the toilet before the game, so everything was fine. And a bitterly cold day in Auckland, bitterly cold, and I started to get that little nagging ache to tell I wouldn't mind a wee right now, and it was getting towards half time, And I think, well, I'll do something about it at half time. I'll have 10 minutes because they'll take it back in the studio in Sydney. Well, I looked down to where the toilets were, and there was a line half a mile long. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to get down this damn ladder and do what I've got to do, and with all those people in front of me. Oh, well, I just pulled it out of my mind, and it'll be okay. I'll get through the second half. Well, the second half started, and this ache got stronger and stronger. Something had to give. What am I going to do? I'm calling this test match live. And I looked at my statistician, Max Kruger, and Max had been drinking an orange juice out of a bottle. And I motioned to Max that I'd like the bottle. And he looked at me strangely, and I just grabbed my hand and I got hold of the bottle. And there I am calling a test match, Australia versus New Zealand, in Auckland, while peeing into an orange juice.
Wow.
So that match stands out for me more than any other, but for the wrong reasons.
We'll have to go back to the video and just have a listen to that commentary and see
It
how
is
you
around.
went.
It is around.
Yeah.
I've heard it once, and the commentary goes something like, "It's gone to loose."
I'll have to check that out after this.
Yeah.
Who was it that you were glad that you had in your team behind the mic? Who got the best out of you, do you think?
David Hill.
Yeah.
He, as I've said, I love David Hill, the way that a man should love another bloke. He was a genius. He knew your abilities or your disability, and he would work on strengthening your whole approach to the business. Now, look, he went from Channel 9. He went to become head of sport for the Fox network in the US. So he has done everything, and he's pretty much retired now. But no, he was the man who I think I owe the most to as far as my broadcasting career is concerned.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Now, taking out the Queensland fans, which bunch of fans would you think would have been the hardest to work with at the different grounds that you worked at?
I don't know about difficult. Loudest, the fans who would always let you know that they didn't like a refereeing decision.
Yeah.
would have to be one of two, either your mob, Parramatta, or South Sydney.
Okay, yeah.
Look, Parramatta in my time had some wonderful sides, and they still got a good side now. But when you think about the likes of Sterling, Kenny, Ella, Cronin, Growth, Ray Price, I mean, these are legends of the game, And I guess back in the 80s, when Jack Gibson was coach, because you had such a fabulous side, the fans expected everything to go right for them, And when they got bad decisions, or what they considered bad decisions, they'd let you know, And if you had happened to call the previous weekend, made a call with the Parramatta team that they didn't like, they'd let you know when you got to the ground. "Hey, you bloody mug, bro, why did you say that?"
Yeah.
Look, all in good fun. It never ever affected me. But Parramatta and South Sydney for sure.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It happened again last Friday night when Nathan Cleary did his unfortunate tackle. The Para fans let the referee knew what was supposed to happen. Yeah. Don't worry about that. Did you have a favourite ground that you used to love working at?
Well, again, Lang Park, I wouldn't say it was a favourite ground, but it was. You couldn't help but be excited when you were there,
Okay, yeah.
Because of the atmosphere, because of the crowd, because of the actual game itself. It might have been an Origin decider or whatever. So that was I always looked forward to going to Lang Park. Where else? Oh, crikey, in my early days, we never had any broadcast boxes and things like that. You'd sit on the sideline with a card table and a microphone, and that was difficult because grounds like you probably don't realise this, but the Sydney Cricket Ground, for example, and I called a lot of stuff with Frank Hyde there, because of the cricket pitch, there's a mound. It's a slight rise in the middle where the cricket pitch is and then falls away a bit, So if a player was on the far side of the field and you're on the sideline at ground level, you can't see him.
Yeah,
All
wow.
you can see is just a movement.
Yeah.
So that was always difficult, and that was always a real test to be able to do that properly. Then, thankfully, they got broadcast boxes, and it made it a lot easier. But no, I think I'd have to say Lang Park.
Yeah.
I never called a game when it became Suncorp Stadium. It was always Lang Park with the broadcast box on the opposite side of the grandstand.
Did you have a least favourite, one you hated going to?
Henson Park I didn't fancy too much.
Okay.
Because you were a long way from the action there, as you were at the cricket ground, of course. From a radio point of view, Henson Park was probably, the worst, with great respect to them. For television, no, it didn't really matter because we were taught, again by David Hill, to use the monitor more than probably they do these days.
Okay.
Because, somebody might talk about using binoculars to call the game, and David would say, look, throw away the binoculars. The best set of binoculars you're going to see or going to have is the television monitor, because the camera will show you stuff that you don't normally see. And that was always a good lesson. So we called a lot of stuff. We were at the ground, but we called a lot of things off the monitor, and then you turn your head to the actual ground to get a bearing on where things were. And then you'd call it from there. And then when there was a tackle made, you'd switch to the monitor because you could see more on the monitor than you can at the ground. They don't do that these days. And that's not a criticism at all, because, what David Hill wanted back then is probably not what they want today.
Yeah.
Even with the commentary styles. I mean, we were told just to talk about the game and what was developing in the game. Today, you'll hear them talking about about movies they've seen, about lots of things that have no bearing on the game, and that's fine. That if that's what the producers want, that's their business.
Yeah.
But back in my day, you wouldn't have been allowed to do that.
Nah, definitely not. Well, you mentioned just before there some champion players in Kenny, Sterling, Price, Cronin, etc. But you also commentated some champion other players during your career. But is there someone you would have loved to have had the chance to commentate during your career?
You mean like a current day player?
Well, yeah, we can go today. Is there a player in today's game that you would have loved to have had the chance to commentate?
Well, I never called Cameron Smith, obviously, because he was after my time.
Yeah.
But I just loved him as a player. I think that he was. You can't teach what he knows, or what he knew when he was playing. And it's only a couple of years since he retired anyway. But he could see things that no one else could. And the way he managed the game and controlled it was just amazing to me. So I would love to have been able to call a Cameron Smith game. He was one. And again, look, a lot of those Melbourne Storm players, Billy Slater, what a player.
Yeah.
Cooper Cron, the big three, which is why probably if you were to ask me, and you may well have a question to ask me about my favourite team right now, I would have to say to you that I'm a big admirer of the Melbourne Storm because of what they have been able to achieve, even when so many of their top players move on. Retirement with the big three that I just mentioned. And you look at the players that left the Melbourne Storm last year, Addo Carr, the fellow who went to Cronulla, and Nico Hines. There, and then you add on what they lost the year before. How can they still be up in the top four? They must have an amazing system at Melbourne, and full credit to Bellyache and his other coaches, but full credit to whoever came up with the system that they have down there, because I just admire that so much.
Yeah, well, they definitely even next year will tell as well how they go,
Absolutely.
because they're losing the Bromwich brothers, Brandon Smith, probably one or two others as well. So,
Kafusi.
yeah, Kafusi as well.
I
So
mean,
it'd be
you take the two Bromwich brothers and the Cheese and Kafusi out of a forward pack.
yeah,
How
that's
do we place that?
massive.
I tell you what, they will. They might not, be where they are today, but they'll be in the top 8. That's for sure. Even next year, because their system, they have these players coming through, and I don't know what it is, but they are able to. Bellamy's able to instill into these new players that come through, the pride of playing for that club. It's amazing. It really is amazing.
It is. Well, you practically, you did get onto my next question there. I was just going to ask you about the game today. What are your thoughts on the NRL today? And obviously, you mentioned there Melbourne that you support. And do you watch a lot of it today?
I watch a bit, not every game, but
Yep.
I'll watch a bit. The game changes every year. There are differences that come into the game, rule changes that make it unlike the games that I called all those years ago. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. There are some good things about it, but not everything. And that's what makes it difficult to compare eras with teams
Definitely.
and players, because you go back to the 1960s and it was like a totally different game. And the game today shouldn't be called rugby league if you're comparing it to the 1960s, because it's just so different. When players were part-time players, that is, had a day job and then play football on the weekend, training a couple of nights a week, you can't expect them to be anything like the players today whose only job is to play and train as footballers.
Yep.
It's a totally different game. There are lots of things in the game that I don't like, and there are some things in the game that I do like. I don't like the way it has evolved, and it's been this way for a number of years now. I don't like the way it's evolved, that so much importance and emphasis is put on kicks. I often think that if you score a try off a kick, it should be worth only 2 points instead of 3, or 3 instead of 4, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
If the try is scored through a passing movement, full points. If it's off a kick, either bomb or grubber or whatever, make it 3 points or something like that. But that's only me. And I mean, a lot of people love it. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people love it. But I would just like to see more ball movement rather than kicks in the game today.
I'm assuming then that you're not a fan of Golden Point then?
I hate Golden Point.
Go back to the draw?
Yeah, look, I put Golden Point along the same lines as a penalty shootout in soccer. I mean, that's not how you play the game. You don't go out there at the start of the game trying to shoot a field goal.
No.
And if you're going to have extra time, well, it should be extra time played the same way that you play the 80 minutes. And if it's a draw after extra time, so be it. It's a draw.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it should be either golden try or go back to the 1 point draw.
Yep. And that's a result. I mean, it was a result for years. I know TV loves it, of course, and a lot of the fans love it. But yeah, I'm just I'm an old fart. I just, I'd like to see it played the same way you play the 80 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we're coming down to the pointy end of the season. Who do you think will take out this year's title?
Oh, look, I don't think anyone will beat Penrith, even without the halfback for the next 4 or 5 games or whatever it is. I think that they are so far ahead of anyone else at full strength. Let me emphasise, at full strength.
Yep.
I don't think that there's any team will get near them. To me, it's almost a foregone conclusion, even though Cleary's going to be missing up until the playoffs. They've got, what have they got now? A 3-game lead or something, have they? What are they leading?
Yeah, I think they're about 6 points in front. Yeah.
Well, that might prove to be closer come semi-final time, but they'll still finish at the top. And when Cleary comes back, I can't see anyone beating Penrith.
Oh, it's okay. Parramatta's got their worth, mate. Beat them twice this year, so We can make it. We can make
They have, and they have beaten the Storm as well. I know all that, but come finals, I don't know whether Penrith will be quite the same as they were earlier in the season when they played Parramatta.
Different season, but we'll just have to wait and see how things go. We'll wrap things up with a set of 6 segment, or the segment that I call a set of 6, and basically it's some fun personality sort of questions.
Okay.
This one might be a little bit hard, but what's your favourite sport outside of rugby league?
Baseball.
Baseball, yeah. Well, you mentioned that at the start there.
One of the things I've done during my career has been to own a baseball team. I owned the Sydney Blues in the national competition,
Okay. Yeah.
and I'm still paying for it. But I played a bit of baseball as a kid and again as an adult, and I love the game. I think it's a game where you really got to. You can't just go out and swing and hit the ball. That's not what it's all about. It's all about doing what the coach is telling you to do. That is, take a pitch, hit to this side or that side. No, a lot of it. I could go on and on about that. No, baseball's my second love.
Was it Dave Nielsen that played for the Sydney Blues?
Yep. No, he didn't play. He was from Brisbane.
Okay.
He played up in Queensland.
Okay.
But he played against us, unfortunately.
That's all right. What's your specialty dish in the kitchen or on the barbecue?
Oh,
What do you like to whip up?
I'm a big steak fan.
Yeah.
And the price of steak these days makes it hard to have too often.
Definitely.
But I do love a beautiful rump steak with mushies and an egg and chips.
Oh, mate,
I'm all class, aren't I? I'm all class.
Oh, that sounds great. I had steak and eggs last night and chips as well. So
Oh, half your luck.
yeah, that's it. Now I'm tipping you've met a lot of famous people from over the years, but is there one that you haven't met yet that you'd love to meet and have a beer and a chat with?
Well, I mentioned Cameron Smith, and I've never met Cameron Smith.
Okay.
And I'd like to meet him to congratulate him on what I've seen him do. Are we talking sport only?
Oh no, it could be anything. Politics. It could be anything. Other sports, movies,
There aren't too many politicians.
musicians.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of musicians in my era. Not rock stars of today, but I worked with Shirley Bassey. I worked with Al Jarreau, who you might not know, but another singer that I've always admired. He's passed away too. I've worked with a lot of people, and I found that the bigger the star, generally speaking, the bigger the star, the smaller the ego.
Okay.
And those who are aspiring to become stars are usually the ones with the biggest egos because they're only a star in their own mind.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good part on it. If you were stuck on a deserted island, which 3 former work colleagues wouldn't you want to be stuck with?
Wouldn't I want to be stuck with?
No, who wouldn't? Who couldn't you stand not to be or to be with you on that deserted island?
Crikey, how long have we got here?
Who do you want to give up?
I never got on with Graham Hughes.
Okay.
Who else? I don't know. I get on with everyone, really.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're that sort of person, I reckon.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone that I wouldn't want to be with. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry, Graham, you're the only one then.
Well, I just didn't like the way Graham went about certain things at Channel 10 when I was there.
Yep.
He may have mellowed, as many people do,
Yep.
but
that's fair enough.
you asked me, and I've got to tell you.
That's it. Taking out music, acting, and commentating.
Mm-hmm.
Is there it'd probably be a little bit hard because is there anything that you would have thought you would have been doing or wanted to do growing up?
You know what? If I couldn't have done anything that I've done, what I would have liked to have been involved in is becoming an archaeologist.
Okay, yeah.
I'm fascinated with history, and I'm fascinated with what they can dig up out of the ground that can go back thousands of years. So I couldn't do it today. I would, get down on my knees and with a trowel and stuff, and I wouldn't be able to get up again. But if I couldn't do any of the things that I've done, and I had my life over again, archaeology is something that I would have been very interested in.
Oh, nice. And would you have the fedora hat like Indiana Jones?
I don't know about that. But yeah, that's something that I've always liked.
Nah, that's fair enough. Now, the last one, this will probably be a hard one, actually. Who is your favourite band or solo artist to listen to?
Ooh. You're talking about the pop genre?
Well, it could be pop, could be rock, could be just one of your favourites.
Well, yeah, I've always been a jazz man.
Yeah.
So yeah, the people in the jazz world that I have liked, you and your listeners probably wouldn't know. So I'll try and find somebody here that you would know. That I like Michael Bublé.
Oh, yeah.
As far as groups are concerned, I'll tell you who I did like. Maroon 5.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Who else? Well, that'll do for two. I mean,
No.
you should have warned me. I would have been put the thing out.
I did say it was going to be a hard one because, yeah, you're right into your music. But now Maroon 5 and Michael Bublé, they're great artists. What's your favourite Maroon 5 song? Or Michael Bublé song?
Any of the Bublé stuff. I like most of his stuff.
Yeah.
Maroon 5, that song that was a hit for them a few years back, Sunday Morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good one. Well, Ian Maurice, thank you very much for your time and your chat today. I really enjoyed it and appreciate your time. Look, I'm sure the fans will love it too, and it's great to chat to a person I grew up listening and watching to on TV when I was falling in love with the game of rugby league. It's been an honour and a privilege to talk to you. So, Ian the Bear Maurice, thank you very much for coming on the Paracave podcast today.
It's a pleasure, mate. Before I go, have you got the MePro ham for me and the Brill cream for the hair and all those products that your guests receive?
Definitely, they're on their way.
Good on you, Troy. Thanks, mate.
This is Para, a place of gathering since time began, where saltwater meets fresh, where our history meets the future. The centre of Sydney, the pride of the West, united by the blue and gold. This is paradise. The 22 Eels season and memberships are now on sale. To find your place in paradise, head to paraeels.com.au today.
Well, welcome back and thanks for listening to Ian the Bear Maurice and his rugby league and life story. What an interesting story it was. It was really good to chat to someone who, when I see old rugby league highlights, I hear his commentary, especially there's some of those great origin moments when it comes to players, para players, especially like Brett Kenny scoring a try. I think it was at the SCG. And also former guest on the podcast, Steve Jackson, and his famous grand final try for Canberra versus the Tigers in '89. Just brings back some great memories from growing up watching rugby league in those early days. Once again, a quick shout out to Jack's Pale Ale, the fantastic major sponsor of this podcast, for supporting the podcast. Now to the competition that the Leagues Club is running, celebrating its birthday, you could win a new car, a fantastic Subaru Impreza. All you need to do is just check out the details at www.paraleagues.com.au on how you can enter that fantastic competition and maybe win a new car, drive away in a new Subaru Impreza. Thanks also to co-sponsor Shannon Cooney from the Merrick Property Group. Contact Shannon for all your Penrith and Lower Blue Mountains real estate needs, either buying or selling. And to the Stubby Club, don't forget to head to thestubbyclub.com.au and order your NRL merchandise today using the Paracave discount code and get your 10% off. I'll be putting my Father's Day order in very shortly, so hopefully the family, or Ella especially, takes note and gets to the Stubby Club and orders something using that discount code. And to Bo Cook from Lone Market, once again, his contact number is 0401 213 236. Get in contact with him for a free chat and see how he and his team can help get you on top of your home loan and find you that best deal. Please support these businesses that support the podcast, that help bring you quality entertainment each week. Share the love on socials as well. And if you would like to become involved as a sponsor of the podcast and get your business noticed, please feel free to send me a DM on socials or email the Paracave podcast at yahoo.com and we'll see what we can do for each other. Thank you once again to you, the listeners, for listening to Ben Ross and his rugby league story and life story. I really enjoyed listening to Ben's story. He's doing some great work now, and another one who overcame a serious injury to play NRL again. Amazing and inspirational stuff. And as Ben said during the chat with doing his ambassador role with Are You OK Day, there shouldn't be any single day that is Are You OK Day. It should be every day as well. So don't forget to reach out to those that you haven't spoken to in a while, perhaps, just to see how they're, just to check up on them, ask them if they're okay. How's life going, that sort of thing, and just be in contact with them. If you missed Ben's story last Monday, simply head back to the episode list and check it out. There was a great State of Origin story there with his roommate Shane Webke. Great story there. So check that one out. Thank you to you, the listeners. Without the listeners, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So thank you for listening and sharing with your family and friends. And please, if you liked it, please give it a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform that you listen to it on. That would be most appreciated. Also, don't forget to tune into the Talking Para podcast as well, out on Wednesdays. 4 para lads chewing the fat about the Eels each week. We review and preview the Eels games each week. We also make a few bold predictions as well, like the first try scorer and the score, and also a bold prediction. It's a little bit of fun each week, so tune into that one. This week will probably be a little bit deflating after the loss to the Rabbitohs, but nevertheless, we will have a chat about it as well. And don't forget, you'll also be able to catch me on Pulse FM each week on a Friday and a Sunday, talking NRL with the Duckman himself on Duckman's Weekend Sports Wrap Show. It's about 6:20 p.m. each week, and it's on 89.9 FM radio, or it's also on the iHeart Radio app. And thank you once again to the official media partner of the podcast, the Parramatta Times. For all your local Parramatta news, simply head to www.parramattatimes.com.au and check out the digital edition of this month. Stay safe wherever you are listening from in this world of ours. Have a great week as best you can, and I'll catch you next week for episode 108. But stay tuned to the socials to see who is coming up next. And once again, if you'd like to send me a DM on socials, by all means, go ahead. I'm always up for a chat about the greatest game of all and the Parramatta Eels, or simply who you would like to see come on the show for a chat, and I'll see if I can get them on. And as I said, don't forget to reach out to those that you may not have heard from in a while, just to see if they're okay. Let's look after each and every one of us. Let's look after each other. And to sign off the show, and as I always say, the Para Cave podcast, by the fan, for the fans. Go Para!